The United Kingdom is experiencing chaos. Riots are everywhere. Muslim mosques have been vandalized. Black and brown people have been harmed. Hundreds of people have been arrested. The riots in the UK started last week when 3 young girls in Southport were killed, stabbed to death, and the media posting information of the criminal who had a Muslim name. Far-right groups in the United Kingdom has used this to fuel hatred, and as a result, massive riots are seen everywhere in the UK. The government has stepped in with an emergency police force. Fears of ripple effects are high because this Muslim immigrant versus white working class tension exists in many European countries. France, Netherlands, where I am right now, Sweden, Denmark, Germany, and so on and so forth. We are seeing protests in Bangladesh, in Nigeria. So these race-based riots have spread now to other parts of the world, and the UK is in chaos. I advise patience and strategy to Muslims, to be patient and strategic. You are expecting me to say violence is always wrong. But here is a reality, is that a bottom-up socialist revolution is what I see as the next stage in Western development. I'm going to explain like this. Justice is a concept and a reality that basically separates the global South from the Western world. Justice, this idea that if you harm me, you have caused damage to me, thus you are responsible for healing the damage that you have caused to me, or I can pay back. You don't have a right to steal from me, to harm me, to belittle me, to discriminate me, to marginalize me, to humiliate me, to kill members of my family, and I should just turn away and forgive you. No, if you harm me, you have to right the wrongs and repay the damage that you have done in one way or another. This is the concept of justice. Now, in the West, libraries are filled with books and ideology and science that is based on this fundamental human principle of justice not being the case. That Western nations like Great so-called Britain, France, England, Netherlands, etc. have the moral right to travel to Australia, kill the indigenous Aboriginal people, take their land, take their resources. Travel to India, kill the indigenous Indian people, take the land, take the resources. Travel to Africa, kill and enslave the indigenous people in Africa, take the land, take the resources, put the African gold in the central bank of England. Travel to the Americas, north and south, kill the Native American people, take their land, take their resources. And build doctrine, ideology, a version of history that denies that these things have been done by Western imperialist nations. Why? Because they temporarily could. The West had superior military technology in terms of ships, cannons, muskets, firepower. When they met the Native American people, the Aboriginals, the African people, so they could do it. Thus, they built, in the 19th century particularly, a very, let's say, pseudoscientific ideology of race, that we are some kind of superior people. We are the white race, the alpha predator, The survival of the fittest is the law of nature. The West said that the survival of the fittest is the law of nature, i.e., projecting what you did to historical indigenous people and justifying this by virtually looking at lions and giraffes and antelopes and crocodiles and deriving your behavior into them and saying that the lion is the alpha predator. Well, I challenge that idea of the survival of the fittest, that someone who has military superior technology has the right to abuse, belittle, murder, steal from other people just because they technologically can do so. The lion, if it doesn't have giraffes and antelopes to eat, the lion will starve to death. So, and the giraffes and the antelopes, if they don't have grass and plants to eat, they will starve to death. So does that not make the lion a parasite that is depending on other animals to sustain itself? Does that not make the giraffe and the antelope parasites on the vegetables, the greens, to sustain themselves? So is the green, the vegetable, not then the top of the food chain because it can sustain itself without having to eat other animals? The point being is, you can look at history, you can look at science, and you can project whatever you want into it based on your own moral account. Now, if we look at Britain, the British history is written in colonialism, the bloodshed of Aboriginals, the bloodshed of Indians, the bloodshed of Asian people, Middle Eastern people, African people, Native American people. Great amounts of wealth has been accumulated and created as a result of this. And colonial systems like the British Commonwealth, the scrambling of Africa 1885, dividing people into arbitrary nations that don't make any sense whatsoever, the same in the Middle East, which is a British term that they invented. There was no Middle East before the Brits came there and meddled. Even the state of Palestine and these things, the Brits have done Hong Kong, India, etc. All of this injustice has historically been done, which has left Africa, Middle East, Asia poor and oppressed and still exploited by Western multinational companies who come there using NATO and other Western militaries to basically enforce a liberal democratic government that will be pro-Western business, which allows these Western companies to still take gold, take diamonds, take cobalt, take oil, and take the vast natural resources of Latin America, Africa, Asia. Sustain a high living standard in the West at the expense of the poor people of the global South. And all of the wars in the Middle East, and all of these horrible events, these horrible injustices, have created migration streams to the West. Muslims simply seeking to take back some of the injustices of what has been taken from Muslims. Africans simply seeking to take back some, not all, but some of the injustices and the theft that has been done towards African people. Asians simply seeking to take back some of what has been done to Asia. So the Indians and Pakistanis, and even the Indian and the Pakistani split is a British imperial one. Pakistan and India are the same people, split by religion. It is actually West. The western part of India is what you call Pakistan. You have many of them in the UK. So, with all of this negative history, the West still today refuses to practice the first level of the Sufi path, which is tawbah, repentance, to admit what it has collectively done and collectively benefited from historically. Admit the negative history, admit the injustice and the oppression and the colonialism and enslavement and genocide of indigenous people. Many Western nations still to this day, including the UK, refuse to take any moral accountability for colonialism and Western imperialism and how the world have been exploited. Instead, of accepting full moral responsibility for that. As you are a Brit, we are even speaking British language. You are in a privileged position in the world. You can travel in many places and they speak your language. They don't speak Mandarin or Arabic, they speak your language. You can get into a better position in most parts of the world just because you are a Brit. So you benefit from this Western privilege. Yet, when it comes to the horror and the bad reputation, no moral accountability is accepted. And complicated New Age theories of, like Kamala Harris said, unburdened by what has been. Wipe history a clean slate. There is no justice. There is no, if you harm me, you have a responsibility to repair the damage you have caused. None of that. People should just forget and move onward. Life doesn't work like this. The world doesn't work like this. So when it comes to the riots in Britain that may spread to Netherlands, France, Germany and other places with this colonial past, honestly speaking, the white working class are not in a moral position to assert themselves towards Muslim immigrants who come from war-torn, exploited, bombed, colonized countries to the West to get a little bit of justice for all of the wrongs that have been done to the Muslim world. And the argument that we did it to you because we could do it. Ha ha, we're better than you. We won. You lost. Get over it. Based on a technological advantage gives the right to commit horror and injustice towards other people. Well, what happens then that day when the global south is on the same or better technological level? Then the global south could theoretically do towards the West what the West has done to it. Right now the BRICS nations are 33% of world GDP. The G7 are 27 to 29%. So the East has already surpassed the West in military technology and in GDP. China has more sophisticated electric cars that they can produce at a cheaper price than America. So America puts tariffs on Chinese cars to stay in business. On the one hand, the West spends so much time spreading capitalism and free markets. Well, as long as they are winning, their companies are winning in capitalism and free markets. But when others start competing with them, then capitalism and free markets is no longer valid. So it brings us down to the very core, as I've said, of the ideology that dominates this world right now. You see it in Palestine with the Israelis, you see it in Asia, in Africa, in Sudan, you see it with the immigrants in the West, you see it with the black people in America, you see it in South America. This idea that because I'm white, I have the right to treat you like I will not accept you treat me. I have the right to wrong you, but you don't have the right to even do 10% of that wrong back to me. This idea of white supremacy, white privilege, is falling apart. It's falling apart. You could do it historically because you had the military to be able to get away with it. But when the global south actually are on par with you technologically, you have black people in Britain who are educated and knowledgeable economists, engineers, mathematicians, historians. You have African nations that have modern technology. Kenya sent a satellite up to space. You have a growing Latin America, growing Asia. Now all of a sudden, people of the global south can actually do back onto you or claim justice from you from all of the things that you have done. So, again, I advise to the Muslim people patience and strategic thinking. There are strategic, smart ways to fight against injustice other than going all out rioting on the streets, such as education, getting skills, fighting politically. But at the same time, I do not morally equate what the white working class in Britain are doing towards Muslims with that it is somehow equally unfair. as all of the colonialism, genocide, exploitation that the people of the global south has faced among the Brits. No, to the European people of Germanic descent that have this colonial history, it is high time for you to repent for some of the historical sins and take accountability for how the world has been harmed by white supremacy, and approach the world a little bit more with a humble attitude. So it is very much the responsibility of the UK royal family, the business rulers, the rich families, the political class, and the white working class to take the full moral accountability for all of the historical wrongs that the UK has done, and start righting some of the wrongs, healing the relationship that the UK have with colonized and exploited countries of the world and their descendants. These are my 2 cents. Assalamu alaikum.